What would you do if the only thing standing between your village and utter ruin was the rhythm of your hammer in the dark? Imagine stepping into a medieval forge where the air shimmers, the tools bite back, and every mistake leaves a mark you can't hide. Stay with me, your night is about to get warmer. Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where metal groans, fire breathes, and your every movement feels like it belongs to someone who has spent far too long wrestling with iron. You're stepping into the life of a medieval blacksmith, but don't worry, you probably won't survive this if you try it at home. The moment you open your eyes, you're already in the workshop, boots sinking into packed dirt still warm from yesterday's embers. Flickers of orange light cling to the edges of the forge like it's whispering, "Come on back, we weren't finished." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the forge before dawn, the sky outside still a deep blue bruise fading into gray. The world is quiet except for the crunch of gravel beneath your feet and the faint hiss of last night's coals that never fully died. In medieval villages, blacksmiths often woke long before sunrise, not because they loved mornings. Few sane people do, but because the day never gave them enough hours. You push open the heavy wooden door, and the familiar smell hits you. Burnt charcoal, old sweat, and the faint tang of metal filings. It's oddly comforting, the way a grandmother's kitchen might be comforting. If your grandmother regularly set things on fire, your hands move on instinct, though they still ache from yesterday. You rake through the ashes, looking for surviving embers. There, tiny glimmers buried like little red eyes, waiting. A few gentle breaths, the kind you'd use to fog up a window, coax the glow into a stronger pulse. And then, with practiced rhythm, you start feeding in thin strips of kindling. The forge doesn't roar to life. It awakens slowly, stretching awake like a groggy old dragon reluctantly agreeing to another day of work. A surprising historical fact slips into your mind. Medieval forges were rarely allowed to go completely cold. Keeping even a few embers alive made the morning far easier. Losing the fire entirely meant starting from scratch. A tedious, smoky process that felt like arguing with the world's most stubborn toddler. And honestly, you don't have patience for that today. You pump the bellows, each pull and push sending a burst of air into the heart of the coals. The fire brightens, hot enough now to reflect off the rough stone walls. You glance around the workshop. Everything is exactly where you left it. The array of half-made tools, the metal scraps that only you understand the future purpose of, the hammer resting on its stump like a sleeping giant waiting to be picked up again. There's something soothing about this level of familiarity. You could navigate this space blindfolded, though you probably wouldn't want to. Too many sharp edges, too many opportunities to stub a toe and invent new medieval swear words. Outside, the first rays of sun finally sneak in through the window slits, catching the bits of dust floating in the air. They almost look magical, except they're probably ash and tiny metal shavings, the sort of thing your local medieval doctor would wave a leech at without answering any real questions. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths actually understood the long-term health hazards of breathing in smoke and metal particles, or if they simply accepted their persistent coughs as part of the job. You take a breath anyway. You don't really have another choice. Your shoulders loosen as the forge warms the room. Even in winter, blacksmiths rarely complained of the cold inside the workshop. If anything, overheating was a bigger problem. You pull off your cloak and hang it on a peg, revealing a shirt already smudged with old soot. It's not pretty, but nobody expects a blacksmith to look pristine. If you walked into the tavern spotless, people would ask who you robbed. A small joke sneaks into your head as you stretch your fingers. You flex them dramatically, pretending you're preparing for some elegant medieval dance. But instead of graceful steps, your whole day will consist of hitting things with a hammer. Honestly, this may be the most relatable dance of all. You take a moment to listen, to really listen. The forge crackles gently, growing stronger. The bellows creak softly. Outside, a rooster gives its opinion about the morning, loudly and without being asked. And then there's something else, your own heartbeat. Slow, heavy, steady. This is your rhythm. This is the rhythm of someone who works not with words or parchment but with heat and force and stubbornness. A rhythm that keeps the entire village running. A fringe little tidbit surfaces in your memory, one of those strange medieval beliefs. Some blacksmiths thought iron had moods, or even a kind of spirit, and that early morning forging was the best time to greet the metal while it was still calm. Whether you believe that or not, you do feel a kind of quiet reverence as you place the first bar of iron near the coals, letting it warm slowly. You watch it darken, then redden, then glow in a way that's almost hypnotic. It's beautiful in a dangerous kind of way, like watching molten sunset trapped in a single piece of metal. You adjust your stance, planting your feet firmly. Your boots are sturdy, though not particularly comfortable. Your hands hover near the tools, deciding which to grab first. Every morning feels like this moment of poised stillness right before the day begins its relentless march. Soon villagers will arrive with their problems, their tools, their broken hinges, their hopeful requests for new blades. But right now, it's just you and the forge. For a few seconds, you allow yourself to imagine life without deadlines, without heavy tools, without the pressure of knowing that your work is essential to everyone around you. But then the fire flares, as if reminding you that daydreams don't hammer nails. You sigh and nod, acknowledging the fiery nudge. Time to begin. You wrap your fingers around the hammer's wooden grip. Familiar, solid, a little rough from wear. It feels like shaking hands with an old friend who insists on loud conversations and occasionally burns you. You lift it, testing its weight. Your muscles remember the motion even when your brain is still waking up. And so, as dawn fully breaks outside, you stand in the glow of the forge, ready to turn raw iron into something useful, something strong, maybe even something beautiful. The day will be long, and the heat will wear you down. But for now you simply breathe, steady yourself, and take the first step into the rhythm that defines your life. You ease into the rhythm of the morning, the forge humming like a creature clearing its throat before speaking. The bar of iron you laid near the coals moments ago is beginning to show its first signs of surrender, an ember-red blush spreading across its surface as if embarrassed by how easily the fire gets to it. Today, fire is your teacher, and it never teaches gently. You lean closer, feeling the heat rise in waves strong enough to brush the hair back from your face. Each shift in temperature is a lesson, subtle but crucial, and you're starting to sense them the way a musician senses tone. Except instead of tuning a string, you're trying to avoid setting your eyebrows on fire. There's a particular sound that comes from metal warming in the forge, a faint, almost shy clink as the iron begins expanding. You wouldn't notice it as a newcomer, but you've learned to hear it. Your ears know this workshop almost as intimately as your hands do. As you watch the growing glow, a memory surfaces of something a traveling smith once muttered over ale. The forge speaks, but only fools fail to listen. You rolled your eyes at the time, but now you admit he might have been onto something. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths genuinely believed the fire had its own voice, or whether that was simply poetic exaggeration passed down through generations. Either way, you find yourself listening closely. The iron reaches the color you need, bright as a sunset that's had one too many drinks. You grab your tongs, the long iron arms cold against your palm. Tools in a blacksmith's shop aren't neutral objects. Each feels like an extension of your body. While the hammer is loud and proud, the tongs are patient, controlled, almost meditative. You pull the glowing metal from the fire, and the entire workshop flashes with orange reflections bouncing off the walls. For a moment, you feel like you're holding a tiny piece of the sun, freshly stolen. You move quickly, setting the bar on the anvil before the heat fades. This is where the forge stops coddling you and starts teaching the harder lessons. You raise the hammer, feel the weight settle into your arm, and let it fall. The strike lands with a solid, ringing note that vibrates up your wrist and into your shoulder. You wince, not from pain but from the sheer insistence of it. The iron resists your first blow like a stubborn mule. It always does. You give it another and another. Sparks fly. Tiny golden insects you swat away with each swing. They vanish instantly when they hit the dirt floor, but not before giving you a few new freckles that sting slightly. As the rhythm builds, hammer rising, falling, striking, you start to understand why fire is a teacher. Punishes hesitation. It scolds impatience. It rewards decisiveness, but only occasionally. You find yourself shouting small encouragements to the metal, the way someone might talk to a dog that refuses to fetch. "Come on, soften up." You mutter under your breath. To your credit, the metal does begin to yield, stretching and shaping with each blow, though not without complaint. Here's something interesting that drifts through your thoughts. Medieval blacksmiths, despite sweating over the fire all day, were often considered among the more respected craftsmen in town. People admired them because they mastered something others found mysterious. Fire, iron, transformation. It all had a touch of magic to it. Some records even suggest blacksmiths were thought to have protective abilities, their work symbolically warding off evil. Of course, nobody mentions the less magical part of the job, like the soot permanently wedged under your fingernails or the way your clothes always smell like someone tried to season you for roasting. You lift the iron again, turning it with your tongs, noticing the color already dimming toward a duller red. Fire teaches another lesson. Everything is temporary, especially heat. You have only seconds before the metal becomes too stubborn to shape. You hurry it back into the forge, slipping it beneath the coals with practiced movement. The bar hisses in protest, then settles into its fiery bed. For a moment, the workshop dims again, and you breathe deeply, letting the heat soak into your skin. A quirky tidbit jumps to mind, one that always makes you smile. In some parts of medieval Europe, blacksmiths were believed to be born on Tuesdays. Not literally, of course, but the superstition claimed Tuesday-born children would grow up to master iron. Whether this was hopeful encouragement or a medieval way of saying, "We really need more blacksmiths," is unclear. You try to remember what day of the week you were supposedly born in this imaginary scenario. If it wasn't Tuesday, you might have some explaining to do. The fire regains its brightness, and the iron is once more ready for shaping. You repeat the cycle. Heat, strike, turn, strike again. Your arms warm, then heat, then burn in that dull way muscles do right before they start complaining. You ignore them. This part of the day is about focus, about leaning into the forge's lessons instead of fighting them. At one point you pause just long enough to wipe sweat from your brow, reminding yourself that medieval blacksmiths often worked bare-chested in summer, not to look heroic but simply to avoid drowning in their own clothes. The fire continues whispering in crackles and pops, as if offering commentary on your technique. You imagine it encouraging you, chiding you, maybe even gossiping about you with the anvil. You chuckle quietly at the thought, which throws off your swing just enough to make the next strike land slightly off-center. The metal complains loudly, and you wince again, whispering, all right, I'll behave." This moment of levity reminds you you've already made your first joke of the cycle, so you slip another one in for balance. You tell yourself that if the metal keeps resisting like this, you might start naming your tools, because what's more intimidating than saying, "Behave or I'll bring out Mr. Hammerstein"? You shake your head, amused at your own nonsense, then refocus. As you work, you begin to sense the deeper lesson fire teaches: humility. No matter how skilled you are, the forge always has the final word. Too hot, and the metal turns brittle. Too cool, and it refuses to move. You must stay present, attentive, responsive. In a century without clocks, the glow of the iron becomes your timekeeper. The sound of your hammer becomes your ticking second hand. Finally, after another long series of blows, the bar begins to resemble the shape you want. Not perfect, never perfect, but promising. You hold it up, turning it gently, watching the light slide across its surface. You feel a small bloom of pride, quiet and warm, like the forge itself. You've survived another lesson. But the fire is not finished with you. Not yet. Tools in your world are more than objects. They're co-workers with exaggerated personalities, each one temperamental, each one capable of ruining your entire day if it feels even slightly ignored. As the forge crackles behind you, you begin laying out the implements you'll need. Hammers of varying moods, tongs you swear hold grudges, and the bellows, which behaves like an elderly goat. Slow, stubborn, and loudly complaining whenever you ask it to do real work. You pick up your smallest hammer first, the one used for detailing. Its head is smooth, darkened with years of soot, and the handle fits your palm like it was carved specifically for your hand. A lot of blacksmiths actually did carve their own handles, shaping the wood to match the natural curve of their grip. A good handle could save you from a ruined wrist, a crooked strike, or the humiliation of flinging your hammer across the workshop because your fingers slipped at the worst possible moment. Not that you have ever done that, of course. And if you did, you'd certainly claim the hammer jumped. Your anvil sits in its usual place, stoic and unimpressed. The anvil is the backbone of your craft, an immovable partner who offers no comfort and even fewer apologies. Its surface is scarred with rings, pits, and marks left by generations before you. Every blacksmith's anvil carries history, tiny maps of mistakes and triumphs. But this one looks particularly judgmental today. You pat its side anyway, because sometimes even the crankiest coworker appreciates acknowledgement. You reach next for a pair of long tongs, the iron arms cold and slightly rough to the touch. Tongs are the introverts of the workshop. Quiet, reliable, and often taken for granted. But lose them, and you're suddenly playing a very dangerous game of, how close can I get to lava without screaming? You test the grip, tightening the jaws around a scrap of metal. Good. Still firm, still obedient. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths actually owned many sets of tongs or simply reshaped the same set repeatedly as needed. You suspect the latter. After all, making tools for yourself always feels like stealing work hours from paying customers. The bellows hangs beside the forge like a sagging leather lung. When you grab it, it groans dramatically, reminding you that it has zero interest in waking up. You haul it back anyway, pulling and pushing the wooden handles until bursts of air feed the coals. Sparks leap upward in tiny golden arcs. The forge roars in approval, suddenly alive, suddenly watching you again. There's a quirky little tradition you remember reading about. Some blacksmiths decorated their bellows with carved symbols. Sunbursts, animals, initials, believing it brought better airflow or good fortune. Your bellows, however, is undecorated, because you suspect any attempt to beautify it would only encourage it to misbehave. Tools, like cats, do not need more confidence. As you lay out the rest of your equipment, the workshop begins to feel like a crowded tavern where everyone knows everyone else's secrets. The chisel that likes to chip at inconvenient angles, the punch that always tries to roll off the table, the rasp you've rescued from the floor more times than you can count. They all sit waiting. If objects could gossip, these tools would be unbearable. A sudden clang from outside startles you, and you nearly drop the hammer. You mutter something unheroic under your breath, then laugh at yourself. That's your second joke for the section. Not bad, considering the only audience you have is a room full of iron and fire. You push open the shutter just enough to spot a neighbor's cart rolling past, the wheels rattling like loose teeth. That will be a repair job for later, you know. The moment the village wakes up, your door will start swinging like a tavern during festival week. You return to your workbench, running your fingers across the surface. A thin layer of grit coats everything. Metal dust, ash, maybe a few crumbs from the bread you ate too hastily last night. Medieval blacksmith shops were never clean, and honestly, trying to maintain tidiness in a room dedicated to smashing things with fire feels slightly delusional. You swipe the debris away and set out a new piece of iron you'll be shaping next. This is where your tools begin revealing their tempers. Not literally, tools don't feel, but they behave in ways that certainly make you wonder. The hammer with the broader head gives you cleaner strikes but grows slippery if your palms sweat. The narrow-faced hammer lets you be precise but punishes misalignment with loud, finger-numbing vibrations. You once joked with a traveler that your tools have more attitude than the local noble. He didn't laugh. Nobles rarely do. A historical fact about toolmaking comes to mind. Blacksmiths often forged their own tools, tailoring each piece to suit their specific style. A smith with strong arms favored heavier hammers, while someone smaller relied on quicker, sharper blows. You've made several of your own tools too, though the first hammer you ever forged is now retired, hanging on the wall like a wrinkled old general who's earned his rest. Its head is misshapen, its handle uneven, but you keep it as a reminder of how far you've come. You give it a nod now, almost respectfully. You return to the anvil with your newly heated iron and your favorite hammer. The first strike lands true, sending a clean ring through the workshop. The sound vibrates in your bones, warm and familiar. People think the life of a blacksmith is all noise and chaos, but there's surprising comfort in these repetitive sounds. You know exactly what each one means, what tone signals a perfect strike, what dull thud warns the metal is cooling too quickly, what higher pitch means you struck off-center. It's like learning a language spoken entirely in echoes. Your tongs fight you slightly as you turn the iron. Their grip slips for just a moment, and you swear you hear them snicker. "Not today," you warn them aloud. Then, remembering your quota of jokes, you add, "If you misbehave again, I'm replacing you with wooden salad forks." This threat means nothing to the tongs, of course, but it makes you grin, which counts for something. A fringe belief flickers through your memory. In some regions, blacksmiths refused to let their tools cross each other accidentally on the bench. They thought it invited chaos or misfortune. You glance at your bench now and notice your hammer lying diagonally atop the rasp. You quickly separate them, not because you believe in bad luck, no, of course not, but because why risk it? The forge is unpredictable enough already. Heat builds, strikes echo, sparks rise and die. Your tools sing and complain in equal measure, shaping your morning with their distinct voices. You keep working, guided by instinct sharpened through repetition. And yet, despite all the frustration, the burns, the blisters, and the occasional bellows-induced existential crisis, you feel something else threading through the moment. A quiet satisfaction, a sense of partnership with these temperamental iron companions. You are not alone in this workshop. You are surrounded by metal with memories, and every tool you touch is shaping you just as much as you shape the iron. Iron does not surrender easily. You've learned that already. Every morning, every evening, every moment the metal resists your intentions. And yet, there's a strange kind of trust forming between you and this stubborn material, as if the two of you are partners in a slow, heated argument. When you return to the forge now, the bar you placed back into the coals glows with a deeper, more confident red. Heat radiates from it in gentle waves that brush your face and arms, reminding you that iron only yields under precise conditions. Too much heat and it becomes brittle. Too little and it refuses to budge. This isn't brute strength. It's negotiation with fire. You slide the bar from the coals, and it hums softly, as though complaining about being woken prematurely. You bring it to the anvil, and for a moment you just watch the color shifting. Orange at the center, red at the edges, flecks of scale beginning to rise. Iron scale flakes off like burnt skin, drifting down in shimmering curls. You brush some aside with your sleeve, even though you know you shouldn't. Medieval smiths often had sleeves singed or riddled with tiny burn holes from brushing away hot scale. Consider this your daily reminder that work clothes were less fashion statements and more acceptable sacrifices. You brace yourself. The iron is at that delicate stage where every strike matters. You lift the hammer, feeling its weight settle into your wrist, and bring it down in a clean, decisive blow. The sound rings sharp and bright, echoing off the stone walls. You repeat the motion. Strike, flip, strike, adjust your angle, strike again. The metal begins stretching, shaping, lengthening with every rhythmic impact. Sweat runs down your temples, and you blow it away with a quick breath, not daring to let go of the iron for even a moment. There's something mesmerizing about this part of the work. The way the glow dims slightly with each hammerfall. The sound of metal meeting metal, each strike a punctuation mark in a sentence you've been writing for years. You almost feel like you're translating the fire's language into something the village can actually use. Need a hinge? You write a hinge. Need a spearhead? You write a spearhead. Need a horseshoe? You write something stubborn horses will immediately try to destroy. A historical fact floats to the front of your mind. In many medieval towns, a blacksmith's work was considered so essential that the craft was protected by local laws. Some villages even forbade smiths from leaving without permission, fearing complete mechanical collapse if the forge went cold. Imagine being so important that your absence could cripple the community. You sigh, knowing full well that important doesn't translate to adequately paid, but still, it's something. Your arm grows warm, then hot, then numb in the satisfying way that tells you you're finding your rhythm. You turn the iron again, and a cascade of sparks erupts like a tiny firework display. One lands on your forearm, sizzling for a moment before dying out. You hiss in irritation but keep swinging. That's burn number 4 today. But who's counting? Medieval blacksmiths certainly didn't. Many walked around with arms that looked like they'd been attacked by very polite, very symmetrical dragons. Your mind drifts to one of your favorite fringe facts. Some medieval folk believed that iron, when forged with skill, could repel evil spirits. Swords and tools were thought to carry protective properties, as though the blacksmith imbued them with a kind of spiritual muscle. You don't know whether to laugh or lean into the idea. Considering your daily dose of near-death experiences with fire and flying sparks, maybe it's comforting to imagine you're wrestling demons into submission. The iron cools more quickly now. It's losing its glow, transitioning from blazing orange to the darker red that signals. Hit me again and I'll break your feelings. You know better than to push it. You lift the bar with your tongs and return it to the forge, sliding it beneath the coals. The fire swallows it eagerly, the way a hungry wolf devours a scrap of meat. The flame roars brighter as you pump the bellows, feeding it air. Your shoulders ache with the motion, but it's a familiar ache, a companion, almost. You could probably pump the bellows in your sleep, though that would result in some very unfortunate dreams about inflating farm animals. You lean on the anvil for a moment, catching your breath. The workshop is starting to feel like a sauna owned by someone with questionable motives. The heat wraps around you, clinging to your clothes, sinking into your bones. You fan your face with your hand, though it does absolutely nothing. Medieval forges weren't designed with comfort in mind. They were designed with maximum heat output and minimal concern for the smith's survival. Your stomach growls loudly enough to echo across the room. You glance around as if the tools might judge you for needing food. They don't. They're probably hungry too. Of course, tools don't eat, but after hours of watching you feed the fire, they probably feel left out. You grab a small piece of bread from the shelf, bite into it, and immediately regret your life choices. It's stale, hard enough to be used as a projectile weapon. You chew anyway because sustenance is sustenance, and the day isn't slowing down for you. The iron is ready again. You pull it from the coals, and this time the color is perfect. A fierce, uniform orange that responds instantly to your first strike. The hammer sings. Sparks scatter. You can feel the shape forming beneath your blows, the metal lengthening and thinning as you work. You're not just bending iron. You're coaxing it, persuading it, dancing with it. In a moment of unfiltered honesty, you admit to yourself that you like this part. The negotiation, the precision, the way a raw, unyielding thing slowly transforms because of your guidance. You make your third joke of the section as you mutter, "If iron had a personality, this piece would definitely be the stubborn middle child." You realize that technically makes you the exasperated parent in this scenario, which feels uncomfortably accurate. But humor aside, something deeper clicks into place as you work. This is what separates a novice from a true smith. Not brute force, but timing, instinct, patience. Iron surrenders slowly, but it surrenders, not to anger, not to aggression, but to understanding, a quiet contract forged in fire and rhythm. Eventually, the piece begins to resemble its intended form. You tap the final edges into alignment, watching the glow fade like the last moments of sunset. The metal no longer fights you. It rests shaped, transformed. You lift it gently, admiring the subtle curves, the precise angles, the unmistakable evidence of your effort. It's still rough, still incomplete, but it's something new, something born from your negotiation with heat and stubbornness. And tomorrow, or maybe even later today, you'll do it all again. Iron always has more to say. The village is awake now. You know it before you hear a single voice, because the quiet of dawn turns into a soft, growing buzz, the way bees begin to stir just before they lift into the air. You wipe your hands on your apron, more out of habit than hope, since nothing short of divine intervention is going to make that apron clean again. The forge continues its steady breathing behind you, glowing like an impatient sentinel. And then, right on cue, the first knock rattles your workshop door. You open it to find old Marin standing there, clutching the iron handle from her cottage window. It looks as though it's been mangled by either a very determined burglar or a large, frustrated goose. She gives you a one-eyed squint, the kind only elderly villagers can pull off convincingly, and says, "It's stopped working again." You wonder what working means to her, considering handles rarely do anything except exist, but you nod and take it from her gently. The truth is, medieval villagers brought blacksmiths every possible problem. Broken hinges, dented knives, warped cooking pots, bolts that no longer fit, tools that bent mysteriously in the night. You've seen it all. Once, someone even brought you a cowbell that had lost its jingle, as if that were somehow a mechanical failure and not, well, just silence. You place Marin's handle on the bench and reassure her you'll fix it. She grumbles something about geese again before shuffling off. The moment she disappears down the road, a second villager steps into view. Baron, the farmer who always smells faintly of onions regardless of season. He's carrying a plow blade draped over his shoulder like an injured soldier. You can tell by the way he walks that he's rehearsed an explanation for what happened, and you already know it'll involve blaming the plow, the soil, or the general concept of farming. You see, he begins as he enters the shop. The earth this year is unusually rebellious. You raise an eyebrow. Rebellious? He nods solemnly. It fought back, snapped the blade clean. You resist the urge to point out that this plow blade is most certainly not snapped clean, but rather cracked in a way that suggests someone forced it into a rock the size of a goat. Instead, you tell him you'll take a look. As Baron leaves, yet another figure approaches, this time carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. You recognize the bundle more than the man. It's sword-shaped, and sword-shaped bundles always mean trouble or gossip or both. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a blade bent like a half-melted candle. You give him the look, the one that says, "Explain." He clears his throat. "Well, I may have hit a tree. On purpose." You blink slowly. During practice. You blink again. In the dark. You close your eyes for a moment. Deep breath. The fire behind you snickers. Loudly. Villagers depend on you for everything metal, but they rarely understand the laws of iron, let alone the limitations of their own strength. And so your day fills with these moments. People carrying in their hopes, their frustrations, and their questionable decisions. You're not just a craftsman. You're a problem solver. Sometimes a miracle worker. Occasionally a therapist. A mainstream historical fact surfaces as you take the bent sword in hand. Blacksmiths in medieval communities weren't just tool makers. They were infrastructure. The village's functioning economy, its farming, construction, defense, travel, even cooking relied on metal. When something broke, people didn't go to a store. They went to you. Without a working forge, an entire settlement could grind to a halt. You place the sword on your workbench and run a finger along its warped edge. This one will take time, patience, heat, persuasion. You imagine the fire rolling its eyes, already irritated that another reckless villager is demanding its attention. Before you can even reheat the sword, a fourth visitor leans into the doorway. "Do you fix nails?" he asks, holding up a small handful of bent spikes. You stare at him for a beat. Iron nails are practically the easiest things to replace, and also the easiest things to break, which is precisely why you make dozens a week. "Yes," you reply, suppressing a smile. "I fix nails." He beams as though you've just agreed to rebuild a castle. You leave him waiting and return to the forge, lifting the plow blade Baron left behind. It's heavy, awkward, and carries the faint smell of damp earth. You slide it into the coals. The fire surges as if excited to be doing real work, again instead of merely warming your indecisive breakfast bread. As you pump the bellows, the plow blade begins to heat slowly, stubbornly. You can already tell this will be one of those tasks where iron and fire gossip behind your back. A quirky tidbit floats across your thoughts. In some regions, villagers believed blacksmiths were secretly blessed with supernatural endurance, as though they were part human, part fire spirit. You consider this as your shoulders ache from pumping the bellows for the third time today. If you have supernatural endurance, it's definitely malfunctioning. Your second joke sneaks out as you mutter to the plow blade, "If you fought the soil, at least tell me you won." Says nothing, just continues glowing slowly, like it's embarrassed. Once it reaches the right temperature, you lay it across the anvil. Hammering a plow blade is different from shaping smaller tools. This is brute persuasion. Controlled brute persuasion, but brute nonetheless. Your hammer crashes down with deep, resonant thuds. The whole workshop hums with the force of each impact. The blade begins straightening, little by little, folding its ridiculous story of rebellious soil into something more believable. As you work, you reflect on how the villagers' needs press in from every direction. There's never one job at a time. There's always many, overlapping, competing, stacking like uneven bricks. And yet you feel a certain responsibility, even affection, for the chaos. The village depends on you. That matters. You place the blade aside to cool and pick up Marin's window handle. This one will be simple: heat, reshape, reinforce. You chuckle again, remembering her grumbling about geese. Medieval life had so many challenges, but apparently poultry-based vandalism was still among the top concerns. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths charged standardized prices or improvised their rates based on who they liked and how annoying the job was. You suspect a little of both. You're not proud of it, but yes, when someone brings you a bent sword and a story involving moonlight and a tree, your price increases slightly. By midday, your workshop has become a revolving door. Tools are dropped off, collected, questioned, admired. The forge roars constantly. Your hammer barely rests. And though exhaustion hugs your shoulders like an overeager relative, you keep going. Because the village needs hinges and nails and plows. Because people need their tools, their weapons, their stories repaired. Because every knock on the door is a reminder. To them, you don't just shape iron. You shape their lives. The rhythm of your day shifts subtly as the sun rises higher, casting sharper streaks of light across the workshop floor. You're fixing Marin's window handle when a shadow passes across your doorway. Long, still, and unmistakable. You glance up, and there he stands. Tomas, the village messenger, breathing heavily, dust clinging to his boots. He raises one hand in a greeting that is far too solemn for this early in the morning. "You've heard the rumors?" he asks. "You haven't, but you already know you're not going to like them." Rumors in a medieval village rarely concern anything pleasant. No one spreads whispers about surprise banquets or miraculous harvests. No, rumors travel fastest when they bring fear. Tomas steps inside, lowering his voice. "They say movement has been spotted near the border. Soldiers, scouts, maybe raiders." He hesitates before adding, "The Lord wants to ensure preparations." Preparations. You understand immediately. This single word is enough to change the entire day. As Tomas hurries off to spread the same news to the rest of the village, you stand there in the doorway, the forge's heat pressing into your back like an impatient reminder. You don't have the luxury of shock. Not today. When there is talk of conflict, even the distant kind, your workload multiplies overnight. And sure enough, within an hour, the villagers arrive not with broken household tools, but with the unmistakable requests of a community bracing for danger. The first is a stack of old spearheads, dulled by years of neglect. The farmer who brings them rubs his arms nervously. "Just in case," he mumbles. You nod and lay them beside the anvil, knowing each one will need reshaping, sharpening, reforging at the core. Next comes a young man carrying a shield rim bent nearly in half. "It belonged to my grandfather," he explains, as though that justifies the shield looking like someone tried to fold it into a hat. You promise to reinforce it. Then an elderly man arrives with a dagger so rusted it looks more like a carrot than a weapon. You stare at it. He stares at you. Neither of you says anything. Eventually he shrugs and says, "Do whatever you can." You resist the urge to ask whether he'd like it to be a dagger again or whether he'd prefer you convert it into a small gardening tool. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind as you gather the weapons. During periods of unrest, blacksmiths were sometimes placed under direct supervision by local lords. Their work was too valuable, too strategic. A single smith could outfit a dozen defenders, maybe more, and that meant your forge became, in its own way, a front line. You don't feel heroic, though. You mostly feel overwhelmed and a little hungry. You set to work immediately. The spearheads go into the forge first. As they heat, the metal reveals its age, cracks, pits, holes like tiny scars from older conflicts. You lift the first glowing spearhead with your tongs and bring it to the anvil. Each strike must be careful, angled perfectly. Weapons have different temperaments than tools. Tools tolerate imprecision. Weapons do not. A poorly weighted spear can break on impact. A dull blade can fail at the worst possible moment. You hammer until your shoulder begins to ache. You mutter your first joke of the section as you examine the aging weapons. If iron really remembers every blow, these poor things are probably traumatized. A small laugh escapes you, though the forge does not find it amusing. As the spearheads begin to take shape, another thought slips in, one of your favorite fringe historical tidbits. In some European regions, blacksmiths were believed to influence the outcome of battles simply through the quality of the weapons they forged. Some legends even claim a smith could bless or curse a blade with a whispered word. You look at the dagger carrot still sitting on the bench and consider whispering something deeply motivating to it. The air grows heavier with heat as the day progresses. The forge roars louder. Sparks spray more violently. You can almost feel the tension of the village settling into your bones. Every strike you deliver echoes not just in the workshop but in the weight of what may come. You imagine the distant edge of the forest where scouts might be hiding. You imagine horses, armor, the distant thrum of danger. And then you shake your head, focusing again on the metal beneath your hammer. One spearhead finished, then the second, then the third. Sweat drips from your chin onto the anvil, sizzling instantly. Your hands ache, your back screams, but the pile beside you slowly transforms, from neglected relics into something sharper, deadlier, more prepared. The shield rim proves trickier. The metal resists your efforts, bending unevenly. You grunt, adjust, strike again. Medieval shields often relied on wooden cores reinforced by iron rims, and repairing them required patience and precision. You grip your tongs tighter and whisper under your breath, "You're not a hat. Stop pretending you're a hat." Second joke achieved. Outside, children run by, laughing, unaware of the seriousness hanging over the adults. Their noise brings a brief, welcome lightness into the workshop. Then a crash from the far side of your bench jerks your attention. A tool has rolled off and hit the floor. You sigh. The punch again. You consider whether tools behave worse during wartime or whether your imagination is simply making everything more dramatic. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths grew superstitious during conflict, interpreting every fallen tool as an omen. You think this is nonsense. Mostly. As the light shifts toward afternoon, you tackle the final challenge, the rusted dagger. You heat it, hammer it, scrape away layer after layer of corrosion. You're not sure what you expect the blade to reveal beneath the rust. Maybe a hidden masterpiece, maybe just more rust holding hands with different rust. But slowly, almost reluctantly, a workable edge emerges. "Look at you," you murmur to it. "A dagger again." Your third joke follows naturally. Try not to stab any trees this time. By the time evening rolls into the workshop like a tired traveler, you've done more in a single day than most people do in a week. Your tools lie scattered around you like exhausted soldiers. Your apron is darker, heavier, soaked with sweat and soot. Your arms throb. Your throat feels scraped raw from the smoke. But the weapons gleam stronger, sharper, ready. You stand there for a long moment, staring at them, feeling the quiet weight of your role settle firmly onto your shoulders. You didn't choose power. You didn't choose authority. But in times like these, the village looks to your hands for security. And tomorrow, the knocking at your door will begin again. Because fear spreads faster than fire. And iron must answer. The next morning arrives with the unmistakable weight of responsibility pressing down on your chest. Even before you open the workshop door, you feel the tension coiled in the air, like everyone in the village is collectively holding their breath. News of possible conflict spreads quickly, and the village lord clearly intends to act before fear becomes panic. Which means your forge, once again, is at the center of things. You're wiping soot from your hands when a pair of boots stops at your threshold. Not villagers' boots, cleaner, heavier, structured. Then you hear the throat clearing that all officials seem to practice in the mirror. You turn to find a steward from the manor, wearing the expression of someone who has never worked a day with fire but would nonetheless like to supervise yours. By order of the Lord, he announces, your production will fall under guild regulation and wartime assessment. A tally is required. You blink slowly, mostly because you're not yet awake enough for bureaucratic poetry. A tally of what? Of everything, he replies, sweeping an arm across your workshop as though he's personally granting you permission to look at your own tools. Your current inventory, raw iron, completed arms, unfinished works, and... He pauses dramatically, which is never a good sign. Proof of your guild standing. The guilds. Every craft in medieval Europe had some form of regulation, but blacksmiths' guilds were a special breed. They existed to maintain standards, protect secrets of the trade, and make sure incompetent individuals did not flood the market with dangerously bad products. But they also had a talent for strangling you with rules. Who you could train, how you could price your goods, when you were allowed to take apprentices, and what symbols you needed to stamp into metal before it could be sold. Useful, yes, but only when they wanted to be. The steward steps into your workshop, sniffing as though offended by the heat and soot. You are registered, I assume? You nod, fighting the urge to tell him that iron would sooner turn to butter than let you forget your dues. You gesture to a small wooden chest beneath your workbench. He opens it and sifts through parchment until he finds the guild seal, an iron mark shaped like a stylized hammer and flame. He inspects it as though he personally forged the thing, then finally seems satisfied. Guild membership was essential but not simple. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. In many medieval cities, guilds were powerful political entities. They set wages, regulated materials, and negotiated with local rulers. A blacksmith outside the guild was essentially a ghost, unprotected, untrusted, and unable to sell legally. The steward continues his inspection, poking at your tongs, your chisels, even your bucket of water. Do you keep records of production? You nearly laugh. Records? The only record you keep is the growing constellation of burn marks on your arms. Instead, you lift a stack of roughly scratched wooden tally sticks. Medieval record-keeping at its finest. The steward frowns at them as if they've personally insulted him. He clears his throat again. Given the rumors of unrest, the guild demands increased output of arrowheads, knives, and spear fittings. A quota will be delivered by week's end. You stare at him. A quota, you repeat. By week's end. He nods as though this is a simple request, not an invitation for you to physically melt from exhaustion. He hands you a scroll sealed with red wax. You don't even open it. You already know what it says: work more, sleep less, don't ask questions. As the steward leaves, shaking soot from his cloak like offended royalty, you let out a long, slow sigh. The forge crackles behind you, amused. Of course it is. The fire loves chaos. You open the scroll anyway once he's gone. The list inside is impressive, in the same way that a collapsing barn is impressive. You run a hand down your face. They want dozens of arrowheads, several knives, various armor fittings, and metal bands for shield rims, all on top of your usual village work. You take a deep breath, then another, then a third, because two definitely wasn't enough. You try to lighten the moment with a joke. Maybe I should forge a second me. Unfortunately, even the bellows refuses to laugh. You step outside for a moment to clear your head. Children run past again, kicking a ball of bundled rags across the dirt. They don't know about quotas. They don't know about scouts or borders or guild inspections. They just know the sky is bright, the wind is warm, and life is good enough right now for play. You envy them a little. When you return to your workshop, you feel the familiar weight of the guild system settle around your shoulders like a cloak that's both protective and suffocating. You remember your own apprenticeship. Years spent sweeping floors, pumping bellows until your arms felt carved from stone. and being scolded every time you held a tool incorrectly. Only after proving yourself again and again were you finally allowed to work the forge as a full smith. Now, years later, you stand on the other side of that process, though guild regulations make you feel like an apprentice all over again. You glance toward the corner where your first hammer hangs, the retired and wrinkled general. What do you think? You ask it. Should we run away and start a quiet life making spoons in the mountains? The hammer remains silent, which you interpret as cautious optimism. A fringe belief returns to you, one that feels relevant now. Some medieval guilds claimed that smithing knowledge had divine origins and must be protected at all costs. They insisted that allowing untrained smiths to practice could anger the gods or weaken the fabric of society. You chuckle darkly at the thought. If the gods want to punish someone, maybe they should start with whoever wrote today's quota list. You set to work because you must. You gather iron bars, arrange tools, stoke the fire until it thrums like a living heartbeat. The guild may dictate what you produce and whom you teach, but the act of forging, the heat, the sound, the transformation, that belongs entirely to you. Your first arrowhead emerges clean and sharp. Then the second. Then the third. Your hammer rises and falls with stubborn determination. Each piece feels like a small defiance, a reminder that you know this craft in your bones, long before officials or guild masters ever stepped into your life. Historians still argue whether guilds truly protected craftsmen or limited them, whether they elevated the quality of work or merely controlled it. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle, much like iron itself, which needs both restriction and freedom to transform properly. Hours pass, tools clatter, sweat gathers, the fire roars with satisfaction. And though the guild's demands hang over you like storm clouds, you keep forging, because this is your craft, because the village depends on what your hands can create, because even under regulations, iron still sings when you strike it. And that song is yours. The forge has moods, but today it's outright hostile. The moment you step close, a gust of heat slams into you like an overeager dog that doesn't understand personal space. Your eyes sting. Your skin prickles. The air is heavy with smoke, the kind that clings to your lungs and slowly convinces you that breathing is an optional hobby. You cough once, twice, waving your hand in front of your face even though you know full well it accomplishes absolutely nothing. You're not imagining it. Your body is changing because of this place. Not in some mystical chosen by fire way, but in the slow, practical, medieval reality of soot, burns, noise, and persistence. Smoke has woven itself into your hair. Soot lives permanently in the creases of your hands. And the ringing in your ears, that hum that follows you long after the hammer stops, that's just the forge's love letter etched directly into your skull. You reach for your hammer, and the motion sends a twinge up your elbow, a reminder that you've struck thousands of blows in just the last week. Medieval blacksmiths often developed distinctive physical traits: broad shoulders, thick forearms, calloused hands, and a posture that said, "I have made peace with back pain." You stretch your arms now, hearing a series of cracks that would horrify any medieval physician. He would probably prescribe warm wine, prayer, and maybe a small lecture about the dangers of excessive enthusiasm. A spark jumps as you adjust the coals, landing squarely on the top of your foot. You yelp quietly, hopping for a moment. That makes burn number. You've stopped counting. Your apron looks like a constellation map made entirely of scorch marks. Not exactly flattering, but undeniably earned. You mutter your first joke of the section. If this keeps up, I'll be crispy enough to serve at a feast. The forge, ever the critic, responds by belching another wave of heat. You step back and look around the workshop. The air shimmers above the anvil, bending light like a drunken mirage. Your tools glint where sunlight manages to sneak through the slits in the wooden walls. Even the water bucket steams faintly, as if intimidated by the forge's intensity. You wipe sweat from your forehead, smearing soot further into your skin, achieving that signature medieval charcoal painting aesthetic that no one ever asks for. You heat a bar of iron for the guild-mandated arrowhead quota, holding it in the tongs until the center glows white-orange. When you lay it across the anvil, the metal hisses like it resents the cold surface. You lift your hammer and strike. The vibration shudders up your arm. A familiar jolt, sharp enough to remind you that your bones are participants in the forging process whether they consent or not. The sound rings through the workshop, that clean, echoing tone that defines your world. Noise is a constant companion. Smiths in the medieval period often suffered gradual hearing loss, something no one recorded formally, but everyone understood. When your daily environment includes iron smashing iron a few inches from your ears, silence becomes mythological. You feel it now, that faint buzzing in the back of your mind, as though the sound has carved permanent pathways through your thoughts. Another strike, more sparks. The glow of the iron dims just enough to signal your next move. You turn it, realigning the tongs, and strike again. But this time the hammer glances off, landing slightly crooked. The jarring misstrike sends a sting through your knuckles. You swear softly, not in a profane way, just the medieval equivalent of, "Ow, why?" You shake out your hand, and after a moment you laugh at yourself. That's joke number 2. If I wanted pain this regularly, I would have become a jester. The anvil does not laugh. Anvils never laugh. You return the metal to the forge. As it reheats, smoke curls around your face in ghostly coils. Your eyes water again. You blink hard, wiping your cheeks with the least filthy part of your sleeve. Medieval blacksmiths inhaled smoke daily. Not the clean, nice campfire kind, but the thick mixture of charcoal, ash, and vaporized metal. Historians still argue whether smiths developed chronic respiratory issues or simply adapted in ways our modern lungs would consider outrageous. You suspect both are true. The iron reaches temperature again. Back to the anvil you go. Your movements are automatic now, shaped by years of repetition. Strike, turn, strike, check the angle, strike again. You feel the edge sharpen under your blows. You feel the surface smooth out, the point forming just right. The work hurts, yes, but in that deep, satisfying way that tells you it's worth doing. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked with sweat. Even in winter, the forge turns your workshop into a furnace. In summer, it feels like living inside the sun's armpit. At least today, there's a breeze trying its best to squeeze through the cracks in the wall. It doesn't help much, but you appreciate the effort. As you work, you think about the strange bond you have with these hazards: fire, sparks, smoke, scars. They've reshaped you slowly, like the way river water shapes stone over decades. You flex your fingers again, examining the small constellation of healed burns on your skin. Some medieval smiths marked their apprenticeships by comparing scars, a sort of informal badge system. You consider your own arms and think you'd probably win that competition. Not proudly, just factually. You set aside the finished arrowhead and place another bar of iron into the forge. The flames lick around it quickly, almost greedily. This forge has been your ally, your antagonist, and your teacher. But today, it's definitely in one of its angry dragon moods. Your third joke appears without effort as you say, "At this point, we're basically in a relationship and it's complicated." You feel slightly ridiculous talking to the fire, but also slightly better. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces as the metal warms. Some blacksmiths believed that sparks landing on the skin brought good fortune. Tiny blessings from the fire. You look at the fresh burn on your foot and raise an eyebrow. "Well, I must be the luckiest person alive," you mumble. The iron is ready again. You hammer through the next few arrowheads, then shift to repairing a shield boss brought in earlier. The impact forces grow heavier, deeper. Each blow of the hammer sends little shivers through your spine. You pause occasionally to stretch your neck, wincing at a stiffness that seems older than you are. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths worked shorter days during extreme heat or simply pushed onward until exhaustion forced them to stop. Judging by your current state, you're leaning toward the latter. The sun begins dipping low, turning the workshop shadows long and distorted. You finally step back from the anvil, rolling your shoulders, feeling every inch of strain etched into your muscles. Your ears ring, your eyes sting, your skin simmers, and yet, despite the scars, the smoke, the burns, and the relentless heat, you feel that familiar quiet pride settling into you, because everything around you, every weapon, every tool, every spark, is a testament to what you endure. This place reshapes you as surely as you reshape the iron. And tomorrow, the heat will greet you again like an old friend who loves too aggressively. Fatigue doesn't creep into your body. It crashes into you like a battering ram. By the time the sun climbs toward its midday perch, you're sweating enough to refill a small pond. Your arms feel as though they're filled with wet sand, and your stomach is protesting with the musical enthusiasm of a poorly tuned lute. You wipe your face with the back of your hand, accomplishing absolutely nothing except redistributing soot in a new, avant-garde pattern. You reach for the next piece of iron, but your fingers hesitate in midair. There's a familiar tremble there, a quiet, insistent vibration that tells you your muscles have reached their limit. And yet the workday isn't even close to done. Medieval blacksmiths were renowned for endurance not because they were magically gifted, but because they simply had no choice. Tools broke. Fields demanded plows. Villagers needed repairs. Lords demanded quotas. And the forge didn't care about whether you'd slept enough. Speaking of sleep, you can't remember the last time you had a full night without waking from the heat still buzzing in your bones. You joke to yourself, you're first of the section. Maybe the forge is haunting my dreams now. I should start charging it rent. The fire responds with a crackle that absolutely sounds judgmental. Your stomach growls again, louder this time, and you finally stop to rummage through the small cloth bundle you call breakfast. Inside waits a slab of coarse bread, a wedge of hard cheese, and the faint memory of a dream in which you once had fresh fruit. You bite into the bread carefully. It fights back as usual. Medieval bread is less a food and more a blunt force object pretending to be edible. You chew anyway. The cheese is better, though it tastes faintly of the knife you cut it with. You don't question it. You're too hungry. While you eat, you listen to the forge's crackling, the distant shouts of villagers, and the rhythmic clattering of wagon wheels passing outside. These sounds form the soundtrack of your life. One that never ends, never softens, never gives you a day off. Hunger and heat entwine inside you like two partners competing to see who can make you faint first. A mainstream historical fact pops into your mind. Many blacksmiths of the medieval period worked incredibly long hours, often from sunrise to sunset, pausing only briefly to eat. It wasn't unusual for a smith to go entire days with only a single proper meal. Your own meager lunch feels like living proof of that tradition, though you wouldn't exactly call it proper. You take another bite of bread and feel crumbs stick to your lip. You brush them away and accidentally smear more soot across your cheek. At this point, you're fairly certain you could be mistaken for a small chimney. When you return to the forge to reheat the next iron bar, the heat rushes up to greet you like an overeager admirer, the kind you smile politely at while internally screaming. You feed the coals, pump the bellows, and feel your arms protest. The bar begins to glow, slowly surrendering to the fire's mood. A fringe little tidbit surfaces as you fan the coals. Some medieval thinkers believed that heat purified the body and that sweating released harmful humors. If that's true, you should be the purest, cleanest soul in the entire kingdom by now. You snort softly. Joke number 2. At this rate, I'm sweating out my personality. Once the iron reaches a bright orange, you bring it to the anvil. Your first strike glances off the metal, and pain shoots up your arm. Not a sharp pain, more the dull, familiar ache of overusing the same muscles day after day. You shake out your hand and shift your stance, adjusting your weight the way experienced smiths do. This work is a conversation with your body as much as with the metal. Strike, turn, strike, step back, strike again. Your muscles complain loudly, but they obey. They always do until they don't. You've seen smiths who push themselves too hard. Their backs curved permanently, their wrists stiffened, their joints swelled. The forge takes its toll, slowly carving its signature into the bodies of those who serve it. You wonder, not for the first time, what you'll look like in 20 years. You decide not to think too hard about it. A sudden dizziness washes over you, just for a moment. You blink, steady yourself on the anvil, and breathe deeply. The air tastes like smoke and iron and effort. You remind yourself to drink water, even though the water in your bucket is lukewarm and faintly metallic. When you swallow, it's like drinking the memory of a river rather than actual refreshment. You check the iron, still glowing but fading slightly. You return it to the forge with practiced precision. As you pump the bellows again, your shoulders scream in protest. You pause, shaking them out, and mutter joke number 3. If my arms fall off, I'm blaming the guild quota. The fire, ever enthusiastic, answers with an explosive crackle that startles you. The repetition of movement, lift, strike, begins to blur into something hypnotic. Fatigue puts a haze over your senses, softening the sharp edges of the workshop. In this state, time stretches oddly. Minutes feel like hours, hours feel like days. Yet somehow the work continues, pulled forward by necessity rather than energy. Historians still argue whether medieval smiths developed unique breathing techniques or work rhythms to endure these grueling hours. Some believe they worked in short, intense bursts followed by brief rests. Others think they maintained a steady, relentless pace. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You work until you physically can't. Then you pause until you can again. Eventually, you set the newly sharpened piece aside and really sit, on the stool in the corner. Your legs sigh in relief. You roll your shoulders and stretch your fingers, marveling at how stiff and swollen they feel. Your nails are rimmed with soot so stubborn it might as well be part of you. Outside, the sun has climbed to its zenith, pouring harsh light into the workshop and making the heat even more intense. The shadows shrink. The air thickens. Your eyelids feel heavy, like someone is gently pulling them downward. For a fleeting moment, you imagine lying down on the floor, letting the warm dirt cradle you, letting the anvil ring fade into background silence. But you know better. If you rest too long, the iron cools, the work backs up, and the villagers start knocking again. So you push yourself to your feet. You take a deep, smoky breath. You return to the forge, because fatigue may be your constant companion, but so is duty. And in this life, survival isn't just about strength. It's about continuing even when every part of you whispers, "Stop." The forge is quieter now, not calm, just waiting. The heat still pulses like a living heart against your skin, but something shifts in the air as you prepare for the next task. Today, you're not shaping plow blades or reforging bent swords. Today, you tackle something trickier, more elusive. The quench. The mysterious moment when softened, glowing iron meets cold water or oil, and the universe decides whether to reward you with strong steel or humiliate you with a loud crack. You stare at the iron bar resting in your tongs. You've shaped it for the past half hour, hammering, thinning, smoothing, tapering edges until it resembles the beginnings of a blade. Now comes the dangerous part. Heat alone transforms iron, yes, but quenching? That's where the real alchemy happens. Or chaos. Or both. You slide the metal deep into the forge, burying it beneath the coals. The colors shift, red to orange, orange to yellow, and finally to that elusive cherry glow that reveals readiness. You lift it carefully, and the workshop floods with light, shadows jumping like startled birds along the walls. You move slowly now, very slowly, your hands steady, your breath measured. This moment is delicate, temperamental, moody. If you rush, the blade may warp. If you hesitate, it may soften unevenly. If you quench at the wrong temperature, well, you'll have a very dramatic failure to explain to whoever ordered this. You lower the blade toward the quench barrel. The surface of the water trembles, as if nervous. And honestly, you're nervous too. A mainstream historical fact flickers through your thoughts. Quenching wasn't just technical, it was cultural. Medieval smiths believed that different quenching mediums greatly changed the quality of steel. Water and brine were common, but oil quenching was often preferred for more controlled hardening. And then there were the extreme outliers, stories of quenching in wine, vinegar, animal fat, and, in the most unsettling legends, the blood of certain animals. Or worse, not that you plan to try any of those today. Your water barrel is alarming enough. You take a deep breath, then plunge the glowing blade into the quench. Steam explodes upward in a violent white cloud. The water hisses, shrieking as metal surrenders its heat in an instant. The blade jerks in your grip like a living thing. Your face is splashed with droplets so hot they sting before cooling. You grit your teeth and hold firm until the water finally stills. You lift the blade from the barrel, watching ripples fade into silence. But your heart hasn't slowed yet. You know this is the moment of truth. You inspect the metal closely, turning it delicately. Did it warp? Did it crack? Did it choose to betray you after you've spent half the day coaxing it into shape? It looks good, straight, strong, clean. You exhale deeply, feeling a wave of relief wash through your body. Then, in classic fashion, fatigue immediately reminds you that relief doesn't mean rest. You allow yourself joke number 1. Well, at least something in my life didn't fall apart today. The forge snorts loudly with a puff of sparks, which you choose to interpret as encouragement. You return the blade to the coals for tempering. Hardening a blade makes it strong but brittle, too brittle to trust in real use. Tempering brings balance, letting the metal relax just enough to avoid shattering the moment someone sneezes in its general direction. You watch as the color blooms faintly across the steel, shifting toward a gentle straw hue. Historians still argue whether medieval smiths relied on precise temperatures or simply judged everything by color and instinct. No thermometers, no charts, just eyes trained through years of trial and frequent embarrassing error. Some scholars even claim that color reading was so accurate among master smiths that they could predict steel hardness within a remarkable degree of consistency. You believe it. You've been doing this long enough to see shades in metal other people don't even notice. You turn the blade again, letting it heat evenly. The glow ripples gently along its surface like golden breath. A quirky little tidbit drifts into your mind, the kind apprentices love to whisper but masters pretend to ignore. Some blacksmiths claimed that the sound made during quenching foretold the blade's future. A high hiss meant good fortune. A sputtering hiss meant struggle. An explosive hiss meant the blacksmith should probably step back and reconsider life choices. Yours was somewhere in the middle, a confident hiss with only a little sputtering for dramatic effect. You set the blade aside on the bench, letting it cool naturally in the open air. Now comes the finishing work. Filing edges, smoothing imperfections, sharpening, polishing. But even as you reach for the rasp, exhaustion pulls at your limbs, whispering reminders of the long hours behind you. You stretch your back, hearing an alarming crackle like someone stepping on twigs behind you. Third joke slips out effortlessly. If my spine breaks, I'd better quench myself before I overheat. You chuckle softly, then resume the task. Filing is rhythmic, almost meditative. Draw the rasp along the metal. Lift, repeat. Shavings fall like silver curls onto the bench. You watch them gather into tiny heaps, fragile evidence of transformation. But your hands tremble slightly. You pause, gripping the bench for stability. Hunger is gnawing again. Heat is suffocating. Sweat trickles down your back in steady streams. You rely on pure willpower now, knowing the finishing stage demands patience, not strength. You run your thumb gently along the blade, carefully, very carefully, checking its smoothness. The surface feels promising, resistant in the right ways, responsive in others. You think again about the strange, almost mystical aura around quenching. Some smiths swore the blade held memories of the moment it met the water, that its temper carried a hidden spirit shaped by heat, shock, and intention. You don't know about spirits, but you do know the blade holds something of you. Your time, your effort, your sweat, your exhaustion, and more importantly, your hope that it will serve someone well. You finish the final round of filing and sit back, studying the blade under the flickering forge light. It's not ornate, it's not grand, but it's honest, functional, strong. A good blade. You place it gently with the others, knowing the village may soon depend on them. The forge settles into a quieter glow behind you, its earlier violence spent. But you know it won't stay calm for long. More iron waits. More demands will come. More blades must be shaped, hardened, and quenched. For now, though, you allow yourself a single, brief moment of stillness. Your hands rest on your knees. Your breath steadies, and you whisper to the blade, half joke, half truth. You survived the quench. I guess we both did. Coins clink softly in your pocket, but the weight is disappointing. More symbolic than substantial. That's the strange reality of being the village blacksmith. Everyone needs you. Yet somehow your payment often arrives in the form of onions, stale bread, or a heartfelt promise that, "I'll bring the money next week." Money flows through your life like water through a cracked cup. Necessary, fleeting, never enough. You wipe your hands on your apron, only managing to make them dirtier, and step outside to stretch your legs. The sun has dipped toward late afternoon, casting warm gold over the village square. People move slowly now, tired from their own long days. Children kick a leather-wrapped bundle near the fountain. A woman haggles with a merchant over grain. A shepherd leads his flock with the expression of someone who regrets every career decision he has ever made. You're here for one purpose: to collect payment for yesterday's work. Your first stop is Marin's cottage. She greets you with the same suspicious squint she gave you when delivering the mangled handle. She presses 3 copper coins into your hand but quickly adds, "I'll bring the rest after the geese stop misbehaving." You simply nod. This is as good as it gets. A mainstream historical fact sneaks into your mind as you leave. Medieval economies rarely relied solely on coins. Barter was common. Some villages operated almost entirely on trade because minted money was scarce, inconsistent, or hoarded by the wealthy. A smith like you often earned payment in food, livestock, or labor instead of currency, which explains why you now own 2 cabbages, a wheel of mediocre cheese, and a chicken that refuses to acknowledge your authority. Next you walk to Baron's farm. He waves at you from the field, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've got your payment," he shouts, which usually means the thing he's about to hand you is not money. And indeed, he returns moments later holding a sack of potatoes, large, lumpy, and enthusiastically dirt-covered. "For fixing the plow," he says proudly. You force a polite smile, even though you already know half these potatoes will sprout before you get around to eating them. Still, you accept the sack. Food is food, and winter never asks whether you're picky. On your walk back to the forge, you mutter your first joke. "If I keep accepting vegetables, I'll eventually become one." Your stomach, still waiting for a real meal, grumbles its agreement. You return to the workshop to drop off the potatoes, but barely set them down before a knock rattles your door. This knock isn't timid, it's confident, purposeful. Inside steps a man dressed slightly better than the villagers, though not impressively so. A minor merchant, perhaps. He carries a small chest under his arm like it contains treasure. "I hear you're the smith," he says. You raise an eyebrow. The soot covering your entire existence seems like a dead giveaway. But you nod. He sets the chest on your bench and opens it. Inside, metal bars. Not iron, steel. Well, steel of questionable quality, but still better than most of what you usually get. He leans forward conspiratorially. "I'll trade you this steel for a discount on armor fittings." You blink. Steel is valuable. Discounts, not so much. Something about this math isn't balancing. But merchants always believe they are offering bargains of legendary generosity. You counter, explaining that steel of this quality demands careful assessment. After all, impurities can ruin a blade, waste your time, and potentially endanger someone's life. He shrugs, clearly not understanding or caring about metallurgy. You sigh internally. Here's your quirky tidbit of the section. Some medieval smiths bit pieces of steel to test its hardness. Literally put the metal in their mouth. An apprentice once tried this after watching a master do it and promptly cracked a tooth. You have never tried it. You will never try it. But the memory makes you smile. The merchant mistakes this for interest. "So you'll take the deal?" You shake your head gently. "No discount, but I'll buy the steel if it's good." He grimaces but agrees. You test the bars one by one, tapping them, checking their grain, flexing them lightly. Some are acceptable. Some are terrible. You reject the worst of them, pay for the rest, and send him on his way. Coins leave your pocket again, just as quickly as they arrived. You sigh. The forge behind you sighs louder. A small scholarly debate floats into your thoughts as you catalog the new steel. Historians still argue whether medieval smiths fully understood carbon content or whether they relied solely on visual cues and experience. Some believe master smiths recognized subtle differences in spark color and grain structure long before metallurgy had written definitions. Others claim smiths merely stumbled through trial and error until something worked. You suspect both theories hold truth because you've definitely done your fair share of stumbling. You turn back to your bench and begin sorting the day's payments. The coins go into a small pouch, the potatoes into a wooden crate. The partial wheel of cheese sits on a shelf, radiating the faint hope that it isn't spoiling yet. Your chicken, offended by your absence, struts into the workshop and pecks aggressively at your boot. You give it a gentle nudge. I know. You're the real lord of this village. That's joke number 2. As you tidy the bench, another villager arrives, this one holding a single coin in his hand, pinched like it might escape. I owe for the nails, he says, but I only have this for now. You accept it without judgment. You never embarrass someone for bringing what little they have. You've been poor enough times to know that even one small coin can feel like choosing between pride and hunger. After he leaves, you sit on the stool, rubbing your temples. The day's barter is piled around you like the world's least coordinated festival display. You're tired. Your stomach is still unsatisfied. Your forge is still demanding attention. And yet the village depends on you as much as ever. You reach for the ledger you pretend to maintain, really just a few scratches on wood. You mark down the payments, or the promises, or the hopes. You laugh quietly, offering joke number 3 into the smoky air. I should open a tavern instead. At least then I'd get paid in ale. But even as the joke lands, you know the truth. This is your craft. This is your duty. This is your place in the wandering economy of medieval life. Half businessman, half beggar, half miracle worker. Yes, that's 3 halves. Math is flexible when you're exhausted. You gather the coins into your hand. Not many. Not enough. Never enough. But tomorrow, more villagers will come. More payments will be offered. More promises will be made. And you, whether tired, hungry, or soot-covered, will answer the knock. Night settles over the village slowly, like a heavy blanket someone keeps draping over your shoulders layer by layer. The sky outside your workshop turns from gold to amber to deep indigo, and still you work. The forge burns on, glowing brighter now that everything around it has dimmed. In moments like this, the world feels reduced to a single point of light, a single breath of heat, a single place where effort becomes transformation. You step back from the anvil to give your arm a brief rest. Not a long rest, just the kind that lasts 2 or 3 seconds and fools your muscles into thinking you care about their well-being. Your body aches, but the night has work of its own. Tools lie scattered across the bench like exhausted soldiers awaiting orders. The guild quota list hangs from a wooden peg, mocking you with its neat letters and unreasonable expectations. You sigh, pick up the next piece of iron, and return to the fire. Night work is different, quieter, more intimate. Without the bustle of villagers knocking at your door or children yelling outside or merchants pushing questionable deals, the workshop becomes a place of eerie stillness. Only the crackling fire breaks the silence. Only your hammer speaks into it. You place the iron bar into the forge. The surface darkens, then glows again. The fire's colors seem sharper at night. Richer reds, deeper oranges, delicate traces of pale yellow that look almost white as they clasp the metal. You adjust the bellows, letting a controlled stream of air feed the heart of the flame. Sparks leap upward and vanish into the rafters like shy fire spirits unwilling to linger. A mainstream historical fact hums at the back of your mind. Many blacksmiths worked long into the evening because their livelihoods depended on productivity. Without electric lamps or consistent lighting, the forge itself provided illumination, meaning night work often revolved around the glow of fire. You glance at the walls now. The flickering light paints everything with soft, wavering shadows, making the workshop feel both larger and smaller at once. When the metal glows a deep orange, you pull it from the forge and place it on the anvil. The workshop rings with each hammer strike, sharp, clear, echoing through the night like distant bells. You fall into rhythm again. Strike, turn, strike. The repetitive motion lulls your thoughts into a calm hum, and for a moment you forget the ache beneath your ribs and the heaviness in your limbs. But the peace doesn't last long. A loud pop erupts from the forge, sending a shower of sparks leaping into the air. You flinch, nearly dropping your tongs. Sparks rain around you like a brief, chaotic snowfall of fire. You mutter your first joke of the section. Wonderful. The forge is in a dramatic mood again. The iron beneath your hammer cools more quickly now. The night air is colder, greedier for heat. You have to return the metal to the fire more often, which stretches the work but sharpens your focus. The glow of the forge is hypnotic. You watch it for a few heartbeats too long, feeling a strange comfort in the rhythmic rise and fall of the flames. You rub your eyes and blink away fatigue. The night deepens. The metal returns to the anvil. You strike again. A fringe fact slips into your thoughts, one you remember from an old traveling storyteller who once stopped by your workshop. Some medieval blacksmiths believed the night had its own temperament, and that metal shaped after sunset held different spirits than metal forged during the day. According to the tale, blades forged at night were said to cut cleaner, while tools forged under moonlight lasted longer. You don't know if any of that is true, but nighttime work does feel different. More focused, more personal, somehow more alive. You turn the iron again, shaping it into a hook requested by the innkeeper earlier in the week. It will hold lanterns near the tavern door, guiding travelers who arrive after sundown. It's not a weapon, not a grand creation, but useful in its own way. You like making things that serve quiet purposes. After several minutes of work, a soft ring vibrates up your arm. You wince. That's the sensation of hitting metal that's already too cool. You groan, lifting the bar with your tongs. You're tired, yes, but not careless. You slide the iron back into the coals. As you rest your elbow on the bench, your stomach growls again. You consider eating the cheese wedge you saved from earlier, but you suspect it might fight back. Instead, you take a sip of water from a clay cup. Tepid, slightly smoky, and terrible, but hydration nonetheless. You take another deep breath, inhaling smoke, heat, and the faint smell of iron dust. Your throat feels rough. Your eyelids feel heavy. The workshop sways slightly, not from movement, but from fatigue tugging at your senses. You grip the side of the table to steady yourself. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths of your era worked more efficiently at night or whether exhaustion simply made them think they did. Some claim the forge's glow heightened concentration. Others suggest night work was a desperate necessity rather than a preference. You suspect both hold truth. There's a certain clarity in the quiet, but your body is protesting loudly that clarity does not equal comfort. When the iron glows again, you return to the anvil. Your hammer rises and falls with heavy determination. The shape comes together gradually, the metal loosening, stretching, responding. You curl the end into a hook, forming a clean spiral. You check its symmetry, tilt it, tap the final adjustments into place. Not perfect, but close. You inhale deeply, savoring the brief accomplishment. Then another crash. This time it's not the forge. It's something rolling off your workbench. You look down to see your rasp lying on the floor like it fainted dramatically. You shake your head and mutter your second joke. If even the tools are calling it quits, maybe I should listen. But you don't. Not yet. You place the hook aside with the other completed pieces and reach for the final task of the night. Shaping a pair of nails for a villager who needs them by morning. Simple work, quick work, work you could do even with your eyelids half shut. You heat the slender rods, draw them out thinner, hammer the heads flat. The iron cools fast, forcing you to return it to the forge repeatedly. Your hands move almost automatically. A quirky little smile tugs at your lips as you recall a ridiculous medieval superstition. Some people believed driving a handmade nail into a stable door prevented evil spirits from entering. You wonder if the villager who asked for these nails intends to keep ghosts out or simply attach hinges. Either way, you're delivering. By the time you finish, your body feels hollow. The workshop is a haze of dim orange light and drifting smoke. You set down your hammer, and your fingers almost refuse to let go. You make your third joke without thinking. If I close my eyes now, someone better drag me out before I fuse to the floor. You extinguish part of the fire, not all of it, You know better than to let the forge go cold. A few glowing embers remain, pulsing faintly like sleepy stars. You sweep ashes aside, coil in used metal, and stack tomorrow's tasks in a neat, accusing pile. When you finally step outside, the village is completely quiet. Moonlight spills across the rooftops. The cold night air kisses your overheated skin. And though exhaustion drapes itself around you like a cloak, you feel a quiet certainty in your chest. This forge, this night, this work, they shape you as surely as you shape the iron. The traveler's departure leaves the workshop strangely quiet, as though his presence had coiled tension into the air, and now that tension hangs there, invisible but vibrating. You linger in the doorway, watching the road where he vanished. The morning feels colder. The village, still half asleep, seems unaware of the shadow that just passed through it. You return inside and close the door gently. The forge hums behind you, half awake, waiting for direction. You wipe your hands, roll your shoulders, and force yourself to focus. Today has its own demands, repairs to finish, guild quotas to meet, and the usual parade of villagers soon to arrive. But something twists in your gut, an instinct you don't like. Instincts you've learned are rarely wrong. You barely have time to reach for your hammer before the next knock hits the door. Not a polite knock, a frantic one. You open it to find the baker's apprentice, breathless, pale, and clearly panicked. "The mill wheel," she gasps. "It's cracked. The iron band snapped." Your stomach drops. That's not a simple repair. A cracked mill wheel can halt the entire village's grain supply. Worse, if the wheel collapses entirely, people could be injured. You nod briskly and grab your tools. When you arrive at the mill, several villagers crowd around the massive wheel, murmuring anxiously. The wooden spokes groan with each rotation, and the iron bands that hold the structure together are visibly warped, stretched, stressed, and pulling apart like an old man's teeth after too much cider. One band has already snapped, lying twisted in the dirt like an iron serpent. You kneel to inspect it, running your fingers along the break. The fracture pattern is clear, pressure failure from overuse. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Mill wheels often required regular reinforcement, and when iron bands weakened, the entire grinding process could fail catastrophically. A blacksmith's role wasn't simply to make tools, but also to keep the agricultural heart of the village pumping. You sigh softly. This will take hours. The miller approaches you with a desperate look. "Please, whatever you can do. People are waiting for bread." "I know," you say, standing. "I'll need the wheel stopped, the band reheated, reshaped, and refitted. And I'll need everyone to not touch anything while I'm working." They nod, scatter, and give you space. You haul the broken iron back to the forge on a wooden sled, each thump reminding you why repairs like this are usually left for anywhere but emergencies. The band is enormous, heavy enough to drag your arms into an ache before you even begin. You mutter your first joke of the section. "Perfect. Exactly what my back wanted today." Lifting a small dragon. You stoke the forge to a full roar, feeding it wood until flames climb eagerly toward the chimney. You slide part of the iron band into the coals. It won't fit all at once, so you'll have to rotate it in stages. An exhausting dance repeated until the entire piece is pliable. As the iron heats, villagers peek through the workshop door. Their expressions hover between hope and fear. The innkeeper drops off a cup of water and a hunk of bread. You thank her silently. Your throat aches. Sweat already beads along your brow. You turn the band again, shifting it deeper into the heart of the flames. Sparks snap violently where the metal bites into the coal. The forge seems eager, too eager. You half expect it to shout encouragement or insults, depending on its mood. When the first section reaches glowing temperature, you haul it to the anvil. The weight is monstrous. You grit your teeth using every muscle you've earned through years of this life. And then you begin hammering. The sound is different from tool-making. Deeper, heavier. Each strike shakes dust from the rafters and sends vibrations into the floorboards. The iron resists. It always does. But today it feels more stubborn than usual, fighting every attempt at straightening. You already regret not eating more breakfast. A scholarly debate idea pops into your mind as you work. Historians still argue whether medieval smiths used rudimentary engineering knowledge to assess structural failures, or whether they relied purely on intuition and experience. Watching the iron band now, feeling how stress distributes across its shape, you suspect your body knows more physics than you can articulate. You return the band to the forge, sweat dripping freely, arms trembling. The fire devours it eagerly. You pump the bellows until your shoulders scream. The flames burst upward with renewed intensity. A quirky tidbit dances through your thoughts. One of those old superstitions that makes you smile even now. Some villagers believed mill wheels were protected by household spirits, and that breaking a band meant the spirit was displeased. You glance toward the direction of the mill and mutter, "If there is a spirit, please explain your expectations more clearly next time." That's joke number 2. When the metal glows again, you hammer once more. Slowly, painfully, the band begins to take shape. Edges realigned, curvature restored. But reshaping isn't enough. You must also weld the fractured ends together. And that requires finesse. You heat the broken joint until it shines like molten dawn. You bring the ends together carefully, tapping them into union. Sparks leap upward in furious bursts. The air fills with the scent of burning impurities. Your hands tremble as you work, but your focus does not. Minutes stretch into an eternity. Finally, the seam merges. You breathe out, chest aching, arms numb. Only then do you realize the workshop has grown very quiet. You glance up to see several villagers standing in the doorway, watching with wide eyes. They don't speak. They don't cheer. They simply understand the weight of what you're doing. You nod once, then begin tempering the new joint, easing the strength back into the metal while preventing brittleness. When it cools, you lift the entire band, barely, and sling it over your shoulder to carry back to the mill. The weight nearly crushes you. Your knees wobble. Your breath stutters. But you don't drop it. Villagers rush to help steady it, and together you manage to haul it into place. You guide the band around the wheel, tapping it into the groove, adjusting, tightening, coaxing it into service once more. When the miller restarts the wheel, it turns smoothly. No groaning, no shuddering, no threat of collapse. Relief ripples through the crowd. Someone claps you on the back so hard your teeth click. "You've saved the day," the miller says. You shake your head, wiping sweat from your brow. "I'd prefer saving half the day next time." That's joke number 3. You return to the forge, exhausted beyond measure. Your arms feel flayed. Your back is one continuous ache. Your breath tastes like smoke and metal. But the village runs again. The wheel turns. People will eat. And the forge, crackling behind you, seems almost proud, even if it will absolutely deny it. Dawn finds you in a strange state, exhausted beyond measure, yet strangely alert. Maybe it's the cold morning air slipping into your lungs, or the way sunlight breaks gently over the rooftops like a soft hand settling on your shoulder. Or maybe it's the simple fact that, after yesterday's crisis with the mill wheel, your body refuses to trust that the world is safe until proven otherwise. You push open the workshop door and step inside. The forge still smolders with the faint midnight embers you left behind. They pulse softly, tiny red eyes blinking awake. You stir the coals gently, the way you might rouse a sleeping dog you don't entirely trust. The forge responds with a breath of warm air. Not a roar, not a tantrum, just a quiet acknowledgement. A tired greeting between equals. The workshop is a battlefield of yesterday's labor. Hammers scattered across the bench, tools leaning at impossible angles, soot settling over your anvil in a soft gray film. You stretch your sore back, wincing as every vertebra reminds you of the iron band you wrestled into obedience. Your whole body feels like an overworked bellows, creaky, stretched, and contemplating retirement. But there's no retirement today. Instead, there's a moment, a rare thing of stillness. You savor it, letting the silence wrap around you. Your breath slows. Your shoulders finally drop. For the first time in days, the forge doesn't demand. The villagers don't knock, and no messenger waits in the doorway with a hushed voice and heavy news. You pick up your hammer and turn it in your hands. Familiar weight, familiar balance. You smile faintly. Well, you whisper, "It's just us again." That's joking remark number 1 for the section. You begin tidying. Stacking tools, resetting the workbench, checking the cooling pieces of yesterday's labor. Each movement is slow but deliberate. Your muscles protest, but they obey you barely. You brush ash from the anvil, revealing the familiar pitted surface beneath. Each dent tells a story. Each groove is a fossil of labor. You imagine future smiths seeing these marks and assuming you were stronger or more skilled than you actually felt. That's the strange blessing of iron. It forgets the fatigue but remembers the effort. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts as you work. Many medieval blacksmiths passed their tools and forges down through generations, each inheritor learning from the marks left behind. In that way, a forge was less a workplace and more a family tree carved from fire and iron. You wonder what stories your tools would tell if they could speak. Probably complaints about overuse and poor sleep schedules. The quiet is broken by soft footsteps outside. You tense instinctively, expecting another crisis, another urgently bent piece of metal, another whisper of danger. But instead, a small voice calls from the door. It's the miller's youngest daughter, clutching a small loaf of fresh bread. She holds it out with shy determination. "This is for you," she says. "Mama says thank you for fixing the wheel." You blink, surprised. Gratitude is not rare in the village, but gifts, fresh gifts, are precious. You accept the bread with a gentle smile. "Tell your mother I appreciate it." The girl nods, then skips away. You sit on the stool for a moment, holding the warm loaf. The smell alone nearly reduces you to tears. You take a bite and it's soft, actually soft. A miracle worth documenting. You mutter your second joke of the section. "If this is heaven, I'd like to stay for breakfast." The forge, in response, lets out a tiny pop. You decide to take that as agreement. After eating, you return to the half-finished projects lining your bench. A set of nails, a replacement hinge, the beginnings of a cleaver for the butcher. Mundane work, ordinary work, blessed work, compared to crises, quotas, and mysterious travelers. This is almost relaxation. As you heat the first piece of iron, a quirky fringe tidbit enters your mind. One you read in a dusty manuscript a traveling monk once traded for a repaired kettle. It claimed that blacksmiths, because of their constant battle with fire, were considered by some to be spiritually fire-touched, neither fully ordinary nor fully mystical. You laugh softly at the idea. Fire-touched. Right now you feel more fire-singed. You hammer slowly, rhythmically. Sparks bloom outward in delicate bursts. The forge hums. The world shrinks to the circle of light surrounding your anvil. And then it happens, a rare moment of clarity. You realize you're no longer fighting the iron, no longer wrestling exhaustion. You're simply working. Not for survival, not under pressure, not in fear. Just working because this is what you do, what you are. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths took pride in their craft as individuals or whether their identity was shaped primarily by necessity and cultural obligation. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. Pride grows in the cracks between exhaustion. Identity is forged from repetition. And meaning is the quiet glow that grows after the hammer falls. As the morning light strengthens, you finish shaping the hinge and place it gently on the bench. It's good work. Honest work. You run a thumb along the smooth metal, appreciating its simplicity. Your third joke arrives softly. At least this hinge won't try to collapse a mill. You stand straighter now, your breath steadier, the sun warming your face. For the first time in days, you don't feel crushed beneath the weight of iron, fire, and fear. You feel capable, resilient, still standing, and somehow quietly proud. Because no matter what yesterday demanded or tomorrow threatens, today offers proof. You endure. So now, in the quiet glow of the morning forge, let everything inside you slow. Let your breathing soften, long and gentle, as though each exhale is tempering your own spirit, the way heat tempers steel. The workshop fades around you, its edges blurring into warm, hazy shapes, safe, familiar shadows that no longer press upon you with urgency. The rhythm of the hammer drifts further away, becoming only memory, a soft echo tucked beneath the hush of early daylight. Even the forge dims in your mind, shrinking from a roaring teacher into a single ember's glow. Steady, warm, reassuring. You feel the weight in your shoulders loosen, uncoiling like metal released from the anvil. Every muscle, every tired thought, every lingering worry melts slowly into the quiet morning air. Let the lingering heat wrap around you the way a blanket settles over someone preparing for rest. Let the world grow slower, softer, further away. Imagine the village outside breathing peacefully, each cottage silent, each pathway gentle beneath the sun's earliest touch. Nothing demands anything of you now. Nothing needs repairing. Nothing needs forging. The fire fades. The noise settles. The day waits patiently, unhurried. You allow yourself one more deep breath, warm and low, and you feel the last tension dissolve. You've endured the heat, the strain, the long nights, the relentless shaping of both metal and self. And now, like a cooled blade resting on the bench, you can finally be still. You are safe in this quiet moment. You are warm, you are calm, and you can rest.